into the sink because I stored it in milk cartons. What I didn't know at the time was milk cartons are made to disintegrate through time. So I reached in for that milk carton of water. At least I got the water. Water all over me. Then the lights came on. And that's when I realized I am not prepared. My friends have a little saying about me: when I get into something, I get into it. So for the next few weeks, I started researching earthquake kits and earthquake packs and realized that some of them were kind of like, well, iffy at best. So I started making mine. Okay. Well, then a funny thing happened. Well, not so funny for some people. Northridge kicked in. And that morning, we're waking up to the earthquake, and I'm walking down the hall hoping my kids, who I trained at 2 o'clock in the morning, shaking their beds to get out of their beds, get their flashlights and little slippers on and go into the hallway. My kids were in the hallway smiling during the earthquake. Now, I don't know how many children were smiling during the earthquake, but my twin boys would look, is this what we were training for, Dad? Oh, yep, this is it. Good boys. It's a totally different thing from screaming, oh my God, to, is this what we trained for, Dad? And that's my point here. It's a positive thing. We hope these things don't happen, but if they do and we have a little bit of insight and a little bit of training and a little bit of equipment, it changes the whole outcome of that moment and from beyond that point. Another thing that made it easy was I had, you see these emergency lights. Well, there's home versions of those that go up on the wall, and there's another home version that plugs into the wall. The ones that plug into the wall are okay, but your furniture's moving around and may cover up the light. That's why I like the ones that bolt to the wall, come on automatically when the power goes out. Light is everything. In Northridge, 70% of the injuries were foot-related because people got out of their bed, trying to walk around in the dark, trying to find the door that used to be here, but their bed moved. So now they're searching for a door that isn't there. And funny thing about our brains, we don't really realize we're hurting ourselves. Until the lights came on, then they see their bloody feet, now it hurts. Now, another little interesting coincidence about Northridge was, some people may remember a picture of 2 apartment buildings where there's parking under it, and one of them collapsed. Well, it turns out a friend of my wife's bought one of my packs. She later got a hold of us to say that it made a big difference, because when that quake hit, she was panicky, but she reached over because she had her little pack next to her bed, pulled out her flashlight, and she could see what's going on. And when she was outside, other people came around her because she was the one with the flashlight. She was the one with the radio. She felt she had control of the situation, all because of a couple little goodies. And that's what my point is this morning, is you can build a very basic pack, and you've got a list there of these basic items. This is what my wife carries, plus a little more. And she carries all that in this pack in the trunk of her car. You don't have to spend a lot of money. Go to Goodwill and maybe buy a pack for $5. A lot of these items are $1 items. A few things cost a little more, like a crank radio flashlight. My wife also carries, it's not very often I get to show off my wife's underwear, but I vacuum pack all her clothes into a little pack. So she has a change of clothes, she has some shoes in here, she has a jacket. These are the basic things that you may need. And I'm not just talking earthquake. You know, that young lady in Northridge, when she got out of her apartment, first thing she was thinking is, boy, am I glad I have that pack. And that's my point, is how glad you're going to be that you may not need it, but it's just the thought that you did make the effort to be prepared. And my theory is, if you come with a positive approach to do this, and even if it's a little too anxious for you and still, you're a little nervous about it, then make your preps and go back to life like normal. Pick one day a year that you can check your smoke detector for the batteries, get your pack out, make sure your water is good, make sure your food hasn't expired, depending on the kind of food you decide to use, and put it all back and go back to life. Maybe that's the same day you would take the family and say, this is going to be our meeting place in the event there's a major quake or a disaster and we can't, meet at home. Now, it's a funny thing, when you say something about a disaster pack, there's all kinds of disasters in life. You could be going to go to a friend's house that's sick, and you go to visit them, and you realize they're so sick you don't want to leave them. You really want to take, help them out for the night. And you're thinking, boy, I'd sure like a change of clothes and a toothbrush, and the next one, oh, that's right. Boy, am I glad I have that pack. You might be driving down the road, and you get pulled over and you left your wallet and ID at the house, but inside my wife's pack is a copy of her ID and money, and, you know, at least she's got some form of ID. It could be that you needed some gas in the car and you don't have your credit card or some cash, or for some reason the gas station won't take the credit card. Well, you've got some cash in your pack. You can put some gas in the car and get home. There's so many different little scenarios that something so simple as this could make a difference for you in the little mini disaster. And then finally we get to the point of, well, what if the great quake that all the experts are talking about finally hits, and I'm 25 miles from home? And you're not driving home because of all the bridges that collapsed. You're not calling anybody on a cell phone because they're not working. It's all up to you to take care of yourself from that point. Well, if you have a basic pack, something like this, it's going to make it so much easier to walk home that 25 miles if you're healthy enough. If your brain's in the right place and your body's in the right place, you're going to get home. And then you're going to be able to take care of your family. And you're not going to be part of the problem, which is the masses that are not prepared. And there's so many different extremes to go into this. This is the basics that's in my wife's trunk. But this is what happens when you study disaster preparedness for 28 years. You know, you build something like this because I'm kind of a picky guy, and I'm sometimes 150 miles from home, and I think, like, when I upped my basic 3-day pack to this, it was just a couple of years ago, I'm in Big Sur thinking, you know I could physically walk home from Big Sur, but do I have all the stuff I really want? Because I want to know about all the mini disasters, hence all the radio communications. But I've been into radios since I was 13 years old. And in my job, sometimes I need safety gear, and I used to do mountain climbing, so this may come in handy, but I probably won't need it, but at least it's in my van. Same thing with an axe and the shovels in the van for work. I probably won't need it in a disaster, but it's there. When you're building your basic pack, you may have something that's a little more personal to you. This pack is very personal to me. In fact, this pack is alive. It talks to me. But the point is that it's so involved, it's sort of like a friend. And the other day, my boss was riding the van with me. I had to put the pack in the back of the van, and I'm like, he's sitting in the passenger seat, and normally the pack is sitting there, and I kind of felt naked, you know. Where's my pack? So when you're building your pack, since mine's very specialized in radios because I'm in a two-way radio, maybe you're into something, if you're a dentist, for instance. Well, then you're a little more hip on medical procedures. And so maybe your first aid kit will be bigger than my first aid kit. If you're a mechanic, maybe a couple extra tools that normally I wouldn't carry, you might carry. So you might want to personalize your pack a little bit. You know, maybe your favorite candy, maybe your favorite little canned food. It's important that it be personalized because it becomes yours. Something that it's like a security blanket. Even if you don't use it, just having it makes you feel a little better about the situation, like you're more in control. Now, so this is what I recommend for maybe you're on an average 20 miles from home. But in my job, sometimes I'm 200 miles from home. Well, somewhere between here and if you go to work 50 miles every day, then obviously what you're going to build is a little more this direction, where you're going to have a little more food, maybe a real sleeping bag instead of an emergency sleeping bag. Maybe, another thing, before I forget, medical, your prescriptions. If you're on a daily prescription, you need to pay attention to it. You need to have your prescriptions with you. You can't keep them in the pack, in the trunk. The pack's going to get 120 degrees. Most prescriptions are going to turn to poop in days at 120 degrees. Not all, but most. So if it's a girl, you have a purse, you should keep 3 days extra at least in your purse. And then remember to rotate it. When you're getting close to refilling your prescription, maybe you start taking those last 3, get that prescription filled, and refill your little container you're carrying with you. If you're the kind of person who really can't walk 25 miles from home or more, then maybe what you want to think about is not so much a backpack, but maybe a wheeled. We've all seen it at the airports. People with their little luggage that's got wheels on it. You don't have to carry the pack. And if you really don't think you can, even with a wheeled pack, you can walk home, you may be not in the physical condition, you might want to think about converting what your stuff to making your car the luxury condominium. Because you're going to be hanging out in your car. So you want all the basics. A blanket doesn't have to be small because your trunk is big enough. You can have a full blanket, sleeping bag. You can have a little stove. You can have these things that are actually not all that much money at yard sales and Goodwill and things like that. So that you have a basic amount of necessities you need to hang out the car for 2 or 3 days. Within 2 or 3 days, you're probably going to get a better grasp on how you're going to get home. Now keep in mind, if you are planning on walking home after a great quake, the initial great quake was our first concern. Statistically speaking, we all got through that. We may have a bruise or, we're shaken up for sure. But there's other disasters between you and your home. And they're little ones, but you want to avoid them. And that is the fire that started over at the 2 blocks away, and your house is that way, and you see the smoke from the fire. You're going to kind of get around, there's other little things to think about. Don't you put on your pack and start walking home. You think about your walk home. You've done the drive many times. You know what's along the way, so start thinking about it. Is that the right way to go home? Maybe it's smarter to go around because there's a chemical plant halfway between my house and where I'm at. So, after a quake, if you're in your car or you're at work and you say, okay, it's time for me to get going, you put that pack on and you start thinking which way you're going to take, which route you're going to take home. You can't just put the pack on and start walking. You have to think first. Now, hopefully, you've already made the arrangements with your family where your meeting place is. So maybe where you're heading to is not home. Maybe it is the meeting place. These are things that you have to think about. Now, the good news is it's a 52% chance that you won't need this as a getting home bag because you're already home. But, on the flip side, a lot of people go running out of their house, out of bed, in their underwear. And now you're outside like this, and I'm not going back in that house. And, but, if you have the clothes in the trunk, well, boy, am I glad I have that pack. If you have some water, a lot of people after a major traumatic thing, they are real thirsty. Just a little bit of water and maybe a mint changes everything. So running out from the house, if that's what you did, which of course you shouldn't do, but we're humans, we do things like that. Having the pack is, maybe a lot of people use the term bug out bag. Well, and essentially this is a very basic, same thing. The bug out bags they have a lot of stuff. They have the tent and the sleeping bags and the extra food, which is pretty, not only expensive, it's pretty bulky, and those are supposed to be kept next to the door. But if you can't afford to do all that, at least make a basic pack. That way you do have something that'll hold you over to stop, to calm you down, to make you think, what should I do next? Now, there's extremes. There's all these little things that are on the market. They're not necessarily extreme, but they may be right for you. For instance, I joined the CERT program. That's Community Emergency Response Team. These people, all they want to do is help. And that's all I want to do is help. And what I like about their theory is, first you make sure you're under control, your family's under control, and then if you would like, go help others. Now, when you join the CERT program, the money you put into it, you're actually getting back a pack that's, some basic first aid. You get a helmet, you get a vest. If I'm walking 120 miles on my way home, I'm wearing this. I'm not taking this, but I'm going to wear my vest and helmet. My objective is to help people. It would be nice if I already know my wife is okay. In my case, the CERT radios, you have to buy your own radio, but that CERT radio works on a repeater at Sahara Creek that's hardened and is backup power and is ready for an earthquake. What I find great is, since the cell phones aren't going to work, I've been in the far side of Santa Maria talking to my boss at Atascadero on that system. And if I hear my wife saying, I'm okay, I'm heading home, well, then I can slow down on my walk home to help others on the way home. If I don't hear from her, I'm not necessarily going to put blinders on and not help anybody, but boy, am I going to be a lot more aggressive on trying to get home. So, that's one thing you might want to think about, is communication with the person you're closest to. And there's multiple ways to do that. I mean, I'm not a rich man, but if I had some serious money, we'd see a satellite telephone hanging on the side of my pack, and we'd probably see one hanging on the side of her pack. But these things, you know, it starts getting, how much money do you want to spend when there's so many other things in life, you know, frivolous things like food and energy, you know, that you will probably want to spend your money on instead. But joining the CERT program, not only do they teach you the basics that everybody should know about, like how to shut the gas off, basic CPR, and what to avoid when you're seeing smoke coming from somewhere. When you're seeing a bunch of people taking a nap in the middle of the road, in the middle of the day, you realize that's a hazmat situation, and you're not taking that nap. The CERT program, while I had a lot of knowledge in disaster preparedness, I didn't really think I would learn that much. I knew the medical would be a little more, I'd learn more in medical. But I learned a lot of things, and I never said I know it all, but I was surprised at things I learned from the CERT class, even after 28 years of researching the subject. So you might want to think about a CERT class. Now, again, I'm going to get back to this pack. I don't expect and do not recommend doing anything like this, but if you are a 50 mile from home on an average, you may want to think about making your pack so that it can be a 10 mile pack, because things drop off. This pack is designed for me to drop 80% of the weight off of it in 1 minute, perhaps 2 minutes. Because if I'm 10 miles from home, I'm not carrying a 50-pound pack home. I don't need a sleeping bag and a change of clothes and to walk 10 miles home. So when you make your pack, you may want to think about, number one, being the gray man. This is a non-descriptive, normal pack. It doesn't look military, it doesn't look official. I don't want my wife standing out looking, hey look, I got all these things, you know, in a disaster that I'm carrying on my back. So the concept in the industry of getting home is to be what's called the gray man. You just look like a normal person walking home. In fact, I saw some great examples. A guy had his tuba case, and inside the tuba case was all his disaster preparedness stuff. I mean, you'd see that guy walking down the road, you'd think, what an idiot, he's carrying his tuba all the way home, and you ignore him, you know? But he's ready, and he's thinking, because he doesn't want to stick out like a sore thumb. So as you're doing your pack, this is looking a little tacky, but I'm already wearing this stuff on the way home. There's no hiding the fact that I'm prepared. But when you do yours, you may want to think about, don't make it look military unless you're prepared to, one, be confronted by people, either for help or, let's just say, demanding help. And two, you become a magnet of people who want to take your stuff. When you're looking very non-descriptive, you just look like another person. Nobody's usually going to bother you. Now, there's a couple of things here on my wife's gear. The strangest thing is your car could be damaged or totaled because a tree fell on it, but the roads are open. The phones don't work. You can't call anybody for a ride. So under certain circumstances, my wife's in Atascadero. She pulls out a Creston sign on Highway 41. I feel okay about the people that are heading to Creston from Atascadero, but I don't feel okay about her pulling out a sign in Santa Maria. So each situation is specific to yourself, but you may want to make a pre-made sign with your little town name on it. The funny thing about anybody else living in that town, they're already shaking, and everybody wants to talk about what just happened. And they see that person walking along with that saying, well, that's probably one of my neighbors. And you'll probably get that ride home faster than you've ever got it any other time. A few other things to remember is the most expensive thing in all of this is the crank radio, flashlight. There's so many on the market now, and they have come a complete circle to decent pieces of equipment. They get more expensive than this. It started around $15, and of course they go up to hundreds of dollars. But I think that's a very critical thing, because even if you haven't done a lot at home, I think you go out to the car and you get the radio, and knowledge is everything. The lady in Northridge was saying that she thought it was the end of the world, you know, and she turned on the radio and realized, oh, she just happened to be at the epicenter. Everything's going to be okay. The rest of Los Angeles is fine, except for Santa Monica, but, you know, she felt better about it. the radio is important. Most of these items are cheap. You can do it yourself. When you go to get a backpack, if you really want to, like I said, you're somewhere between here, then maybe it shouldn't be a cheap backpack because you're going to be getting a lot of weight in there, more items. You may want to buy a quality pack, let's say from Pack and Camp, one of the vendors that are out there. Maybe you don't have the time to make up something like this and just want something pre-made. Well, the 911 Supply House, they're out here. They have pre-made emergency packs. But what I really want to push here is that this is a very positive thing. Think back to my kids walking in that hallway with smiles on their face. Being prepared, knowing what to expect, will change everything. So by preparing, you're telling yourself, I'm going to take hold of, in fact, in our lives, we can't hardly take hold of anything that's going on around us, but I'm going to take hold of my situation under a disaster. That's a very positive thing. I'm going to become part of the solution, not the problem, after a disaster. That's a very positive thing. I'm going to make sure my family knows where we're going to meet and understands that everything will be okay because we planned and we have the preps ready. That's a very positive thing. And I'm hoping that today, as you're watching different seminars, I mean, I've talked a little bit of doom and gloom. The reality is, the man who really might hopefully make you think really hard is Ian Parkins will be coming in here. And he'll be talking about the reality of when a great quake hits this area, there'll be no FEMA coming this way. They're heading to Los Angeles and San Francisco. We're kind of like the oddballs here in between two major cities. We're not going to be getting help that most people think we're going to be getting quickly. It's going to be a while. And if the power is out for weeks or maybe months because of a great quake, we're really talking about some serious situations. Well, by being prepared, you're part of the solution. We should be more prepared when you think about the fact that our emergency group, many of them are going to be heading out of the area because the big cities will be overwhelmed. So we have it in our grasp. We have people around us that we're so lucky that the majority of the people around us are what I call either shepherds or sheep. We have very few wolves. Shepherds are the Red Cross people and the sheriffs and the fire department and the people who have prepared and the CERT members, things like that. And the sheep are the ones, either we prepared or very little, and most of the sheep don't know what to do. And of course the wolves are the ones we want to watch out for. Well, the good news is we have very few wolves that I would be concerned about in this particular area. And in the first 24 hours, even the wolves become sheep. They're like, wow, what was that? And they're not thinking about ripping people off in the beginning. Anyway, in conclusion, I got my 2-minute warning. I just want to say approach it with a very positive attitude. Because by doing these things, you're telling yourself and you're showing others that you're going to take hold of a bad situation. And the little bits, every little step you take is going to be that much after the event. Any questions?
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
Real quick. I know I was in the Paso Robles quake.
Right.
And I was actually work at Camp Roberts.
Right.
And like you said, cell phones were completely out.
Right. And that was a minor quake.
Yeah, that was a minor
Unfortunately, 2 people were in the wrong place at the wrong time.
They actually ran out of the place.
Yeah, they ran out, just like
concrete,
you're not supposed to do.
Yeah, exactly. The concrete thing collapsed on.
Yep.
But you said that radio tower is available for...
Well, yeah, it's a hardened tower, meaning it was designed specifically for the power to go out, and that's with the 2-way radios for the CERT program.
Right.
So that's when they need it the most. So they specifically set it up as a hardened, powered backup, battery backup repeater system up there at Sahara Creek.
I was wondering, how overwhelmed is that going to be?
Oh, it'll be quite overwhelmed. Yeah.
And stuff.
I mean, there's, of course, there's many other frequencies emergency services are going to be using, but CERT is utilizing that and a few others. Their hope is that everybody has the understanding that they're just going to quit. Like my wife, I'm okay, I'm heading home, great, bye. And we're going to get off the radio. You know, short and sweet. Hopefully, right. And we also understand a lot of people that have gotten these CERT radios, CERT members, they're not checking the batteries. And right now, I bet you there's 50 CERT radios out there with dead batteries in the glove box of cars. You know? Any more questions? Yeah.
How close or far from home do you recommend a backup site to meet for your family?
Well, see, every situation is different. If I lived right next to a chemical plant, I'd want my meeting place to be, 5 to 10 miles away. It depends on where the local point is. If somebody works here, somebody works here, somebody works here, and the house is over there, but this is the middle, maybe that's the spot you should be finding for everybody to meet. Unfortunately, there's no single answer. Well, folks, I hope you got a little bit out of this, and I hope you approach everything out there and the rest of the conversations here with a very positive, and I'm going to do this approach. And I promise you, I hope you'll never find out, but I promise you, if you do find out, that your press are going to make a big difference. You'll be the 5-year-olds in the hallway smiling. All right? Thank you, folks.